We're standing in front of a hole in the ground right now on West 41st and East Boulevard. There used to be a restaurant here that burned to the ground. Several businesses have been destroyed and some people were displaced. How do you feel looking at a site like this, seeing these buildings struggling to recover?
Yeah, I think for me, as a fire chief in a community, looking at the impact and the devastation that comes with any fire is always very tragic. Right? It's not just about loss of lives, which happens, or people that are injured. We think about the community and businesses that are impacted.
I did speak to a gentleman yesterday. He owned a vape shop on the building right next to it, which is also empty. And he says that he still doesn't have any answers in terms of how the fire investigation is going.
My name is Krishna. I thought it was a regular, a fire accident, a small fire accident. But later we came to know it was the impact was too much, and then the whole building, this building, the next, the neighboring two buildings were gone. We didn't get any fire report from the fire department yet, so no one knows what happened.
From what my understanding, it appears that our investigators have most likely determined that it started on the outside of the building. If the building is even sprinklered, it's not going to stop it from spreading on the outside. It gets up into those empty spaces and travels quickly. By the time our crews arrived on scene and the fire was put out, there was so much damage to actually determine the actual cause, so it would be undetermined as to what started that fire. When a fire occurs, it isn't just about the cost of a fire investigation or the loss of the building, but it's really about the livelihood. And the livelihood in the community, the livelihood of employees.
So in the fire last year, 55 firefighters were deployed. If you can sort of take us through what it takes to put out a massive fire and the risks that these firefighters take.
We do have great resources, but even 55 on scene isn't generally enough. An initial deployment would probably see about 3 apparatus responding, and we quickly escalated and start bringing in fire apparatus from around the city. There's a lot of risk to firefighters. Today you can still smell the smell of smoke, right? And the number one killer of firefighters in the country is cancer. And even last week we had one of our on-duty firefighters die from a workplace injury related to cancer, which is tragic. We had our big West 41st fire 2 weeks ago in the Dunbar neighborhood, and it amazes me that we didn't lose an entire block of houses. It takes a lot. We have highly trained. We spend a lot of time training with our crews. They're very well skilled, but it is dangerous every single time from responding to that fire, along the way in the fire engines, to arriving on scene and doing their size ups, to working inside.
So Chief, if we go around this neighborhood, a good portion of these buildings have aged a lot, and this neighborhood has seen their fair share of fires over the years. So what makes certain communities more vulnerable to structure fires?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that make communities vulnerable. One is about the residents, people that are living within the community, so their behaviors. But then again, it's about the age of the building. They don't necessarily have all the life and fire safety equipment put into them. Many of these buildings might not have sprinklers in them. We now have a building code within the City of Vancouver that requires all of our buildings to be sprinklered. Many of these buildings won't have working sprinkler systems in them. So the age and the infrastructures, we have many old areas in the City of Vancouver. And when we get a fire potentially into the side walls, it creates this vacuum, and it's a big open space. We're seeing that a lot in our older neighborhoods, where we call them void spaces, and we're chasing the fire, and they just keep spreading. And you think you've got it, and it's moved on through the path of least resistance. So we see a lot of that. Even today when we look at some of these buildings here, they're boarded up. We have a bunch of cardboard sitting here. That's a fire risk, right?
Do you think the fire code rules are enough to prevent these fires? Should be updated?
Well, the fire code's always changing, but it only kind of reverts back to the age of when they were built. Of course, there's some buildings that we would like to see have updated systems in place, like fire alarm systems, especially in our residential buildings.
The last annual report put out by the Vancouver Fire Service, it said that there were 4,300 fires that crews had to tend to, and it increased by 10%, I believe, in 2023. So how are crews and firefighting resources just managing all of this volume?
Yeah, we continually seen such an increase, and I think even this year to date, we're seeing the property and the dollar value loss just skyrocket because they're bigger fires. While we may have a fire, that 4,300 fires include all of our outdoor fires. So if this caught on fire and didn't cause any damage to the building, that would be considered an outdoor fire, or something that's a bushfire type of thing. Once it hits a building and causes damage to that building, we have nearly 800 fires a year in our building. So it's like 2 a day in our city of Vancouver. So when we talk about resources, we need to continually build up resources.
How much work do you think needs to be done in order to minimize fire hazards overall in a community?
Yeah, I think prevention's key, right? We always talk about the importance of public education and prevention. We are fantastic at reaction, like responding to an emergency and putting a fire out, but our goals is to actually reduce the number of fires. If you're a business owner or you're leasing a building, to make sure that you've had your systems checked and tested, as you are required to do under the fire code. But it really is about safe practices too, right? And we can all be safer.